So I'm very, very pleased to welcome everyone to the beginning of this series. I'm very happy to have this conversation with technical experts and practitioner experts about what we're talking about in how AI is going to work with recruiting. Okay, so before we go any further, it's worth doing a few sound checks. I think we're live streaming this in two kind of places, both on Zoom. So if you're on Zoom, I wonder whether you could let me know whether the audio visual is okay for all of us. You should see 4 people on screen. Just give me a chat there to let me know everyone can hear and see me okay. We're also live streaming this on LinkedIn on Metaview's company page. So if you're watching this on the company page, let me know whether you can hear me okay. Just drop me a comment or emoji or something like that, and confirm that everything is fine. Siadhal, Matthias, and Annie, would you like to say just a quick word now, just to test the audio, just to make sure that everyone can hear you okay?
Test, test, test.
Hello.
Hello, hello.
Dulcet tones, folks. If you can hear all our marvelous guests, please let us know. Okay, let's get on with it. I think audio and visual sounds good. Bit of housekeeping, folks. Obviously, everyone is using the chat on Zoom for communication. Please continue to do that. Feel free to contribute to the conversation. All of us are looking at the chat as well as talking to you live, so we're going to try and interact with you as much as we can. Same goes for folks who are doing this on LinkedIn. We're monitoring that as well, so if you've got any comments, questions, or anything you want to discuss, please do comment away there and we'll try and address it. In terms of a Q&A, I believe there's a Q&A, so if there's any specific question you want us to definitely nail and not miss, put it in the Q&A function at the bottom, and with I think at the end of it, end of this session, we're going to do 10 minutes on audience Q&A on specific things. So if you're chatting, use the chat. If you've got a specific question, use the question and answer feature. Okay, let's do some intros. I'll introduce myself real quick. I'm Hung Lee. I curate Recruiting Brainfood. It's an online community newsletter live stream. If you haven't subscribed already, please do so. You might find it entertaining and occasionally useful. Let's go to Siadhal. Siadhal, good to see you, and happy birthday, Siadhal. It's Siadhal's birthday, by the way. Please wish him a happy birthday. Sal, thanks for sort of sorting this webinar series out. Why don't you quickly introduce yourself, what it is you do, sir?
Sure. So, hey, folks, I'm Siadhal, co-founder and CEO here at Metaview. Really delighted to be involved in this series. Just want to share a little bit of background about why we're doing this series. I guess Hung's given a chunk there, but there's really no doubt that AI is going to totally revolutionize productivity. And there's obviously so much debate and discussion to be had about what that means for recruiting. And whenever I speak with recruiting leaders or recruiters, it's very much top of mind for them. So that's why we wanted to come together with Hung and some amazing guests to create this forum, essentially. Metaview is a first of its kind AI that automatically generates world-class summarized notes after every interview. So we know that sort of diligently taking notes during interviews is a really admirable thing that people have done for decades and decades and decades, but it really makes for a really terrible candidate experience, and now is something that machines are better at than a human being. So that really means it's time to stop doing that, because it's not going to be around as a skill for much longer. So with Metaview handling note-taking, recruiters and interviewers can focus much more on getting to know candidates and building relationships instead of furiously writing those scrappy notes and then sort of formatting them afterwards. So it helps you be more efficient, but also we believe, and sort of all the feedback we're getting is it actually helps you be more human, which I think is going to be like a recurring topic we come back to. Like, how can technology help you be more human as opposed to sort of less so? So yeah, really the closest thing to magic I've ever seen in the recruiting space. So if you're interested, head over to Metaview. You can request a free trial. You can get set up in minutes. And yeah, excited to have this chat today.
Yeah, fantastic. And actually, sort of the interview notes aspect probably is the most directly obvious thing that recruiters can use AI for. I know a lot of recruiters are very interested in AI, and a lot of it does seem like, oh my goodness, I wish I could use it, but hard to drop into your current process because, you know, how else, or what am I meant to do? But you know what? There's one thing that we are currently doing, which is making notes. Either we're typing this out while we're speaking to people, or there's a notepad next to you scribbling away if you don't want to make those tapping noises, that can go away. So this is an immediately practical thing you can try. Go ahead and use the free trial. It won't be free for much longer, I guarantee you. These are things that are going to happen and you're going to be paying for it. So get good at it, learn how to do it whilst it's still for free. Okay, let's go to Matthias. Matthias, great to see you. Can you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
Yeah, thank you. Happy to be here. My name is Matthias, Global Director of Talent Acquisition and Employer Branding at EMnify. Currently been in the market for over 10, 15 years now, and having experience in a lot of different sizes of organizations, big public companies up to startups and scale-ups, and I'm more than happy to contribute to the conversation today. Thank you.
Fantastic stuff. And Annie, great to see you. Would you like to quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do, Annie?
Yeah, of course. So hi, everyone. I'm Annie. I'm head of talent at Cleo. Around 10 years experience in TA, currently leading a team of recruiters at Cleo. For those who haven't heard of Cleo, we're a fintech scale-up with headquarters in London, but with teams across the UK, the US and Europe. Our app is predominantly focused on helping young people in the US to improve their financial well-being, all through the AI called Cleo. She roasts you for your spending habits. She helps you to improve your credit score over time, and helps people to kind of build their savings as well. Yeah, really great to be on the panel today. AI is both a huge topic in recruitment, but also a big one for us at Cleo as well. So really excited to be here.
Fantastic stuff. Let's start off with the first question, folks. Where are we with AI as far as sort of candidate assessment is concerned? So that's the narrow focus of today's topic, particularly how we assess what is a good or bad candidate, which candidate goes through, which candidate doesn't go through. Where do you think we're at, like market wide, and where are you specifically in your business? And it's okay to say, we're not using it, it's all human based, but are there any elements of AI that you're currently using in your assessment flow? Let's go to you firstly with that question, Matthias.
Yeah, happy user, customer of Metaview. We very early on decided to invest in interview intelligence, looked at a lot of different providers, and decided then to go with Metaview. So everything that was already discussed here with the note-taking is something that we already experienced live, and that is really helping. I think in general, to answer your question, Hang, I think it's also this topic of, I see that both sides, right? So the one side is looking at CVs that being screened, that being matched against certain criteria, and AI is helping to identify especially high volume recruiters to understand who is a perfect match for this. But then there's also the dark side, let's say, with experience and cases that we probably talk about with Amazon and Workday that have serious lawsuits against them because they tackle this one side of this very, let's say, very biased document and very biased heavy data points that we have. And on the other side, I think maybe we should really focus not so much on that side and assessing candidates, but rather really making interviewers better, which is more on the Metaview take. So I think this is something that I see happening at the assessment approach here.
Yeah, so really interesting distinction. And Matthias, I'm just going to try and sort of re-encapsulate that for the audience. Correct me if I've got you wrong on this. So I guess the earliest view of how AI might be used for assessment is that the machine is the initial filter. It's going to blast away candidates and make decisions who goes forward, even to the point where it may start like making recommendations to offer, et cetera, et cetera. And that's one way of doing it. We've seen it work before, or seen it in operation before, should I say, but that's triggered issues because people can then say, you know what, there's some baked in bias on that. I think, again, the Amazon is probably now the canonical example of what might happen, because this internal AI was trained on its previous recruiting decisions, and the AI obviously ended up just doubling down on its previous recruiting decisions, which at that time did not at all factor in the diversity of the people being brought into play, and in fact leaned against that. So ended up recruiting yet more individuals of a similar demographic, and that ended up being quite a spectacular case against AI. Now, what you're saying is the better use of AI is actually to take it away from that direct assessment piece, but rather to use it as a training and recruiter empowerment tool, so that you help the recruiters get better at still doing the human assessing. So it's AI enablement of human recruiters as opposed to AI as a filter in front of the process. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. My summary skills, I think, are still there. I'm not sure whether I'm not sure Metaview could have done that better. Maybe in a couple of months, who knows? Right, Annie, let's go to you. I'm very interested to know from your perspective, because obviously AI is a big part of what Cleo do. I mean, it's one of those where it's providing aggregate information, so it could genuinely give you some legit information from the what the market is saying, to say, hey, actually, this is a better decision to make. Has that influenced your thinking about how AI can be used in recruiting? Or are you kind of in the scenario where, I don't know, where are you sitting ethically with the use of AI right now when it comes to assessing candidates?
Very similar to the previous answer. I think we're early stages of using AI, particularly more so to enable our recruiters, particularly when they're starting to work on a new role that perhaps we haven't hired for before, to come up with questions, to work on building out rubrics and scoring rubrics for those interviews at phone screen, whether it's like a data science role that maybe a product recruiter can jump on and help with. And that's probably where we've seen the biggest use so far and take up on using ChatGPT and other tools like that for recruitment so far.
Yeah, very interesting. So again, classic use case, right? I mean, you get sort of new role, you've got no familiarity with it. AI can help you really ramp up your capability as a human recruiter and basically save you research time. So I think that was actually the first thing I kind of used ChatGPT for, is like, can you give me a bunch of interview questions if I'm hiring for a solutions architect for this? And it actually it can produce all that information for you. So again, empowering the human recruiter to do things better. Folks, quick question for you out there in the audience. And by the way, I make no judgment here at all. How are you using AI in candidate assessment? Are you doing the same as our two panelists here, which is, trying to upskill or up-level the human recruiter? Or are you, giving the Amazon style another go? I mean, is there a legitimate case to use it for this purpose? Let's think about this. I think, Matthias, you mentioned the high volume experience. It's impossible to think of a human being having legitimately to just go through hundreds, 500, 1,000 applications. Would an AI not be better? And in fact, part of the problem we do have is that in order to control applicant flow, one of the things that human recruiters have been doing is artificially creating additional barriers to application in order to control applicant flow. Why else are we asking for university degrees, for instance, for jobs that, the degree doesn't map particularly to the skills of the job? We do it in order to convert 1,000 applications to 100. So, it could well be that an AI would actually increase the aperture for the types of people that can come in and be more fair. So perhaps we need to think, is Amazon's implementation not the definitive case, but just a bad example that needs to be iterated on? So folks, let me know in the comments or in the sort of chat on Zoom here, what your thinking is. Can we use it for both of these styles of work? Sal, let's go to you on this. As a product maker, where are you sitting with AI in candidate assessment? I know sort of obviously with Metaview, it's particularly about empowering recruiters, but do you think there is a case for having it as a filter ahead of the recruiter?
So yeah, overall would sort of reinforce what's been said so far, which is like improving humans' ability to spend time on the things that matter and make better decisions is what it's about. And I think that's like that last point is the key thing. You sort of mentioned like a really fuzzy sort of tools we already have in place for assessing candidates. Did they go to the university? No, they didn't. Okay, fine. Of course, anyone who sort of makes that judgment knows that there's a really healthy portion of people who didn't go to university who could probably do a great job. They just need some reason, some way to make the pool of candidates they're looking at less large. And so the way that you should think about AI, and I guess technology more broadly, is it can give you much higher resolution, higher definition ways to look at human beings, and then but still leaves you with a judgment to sort of say, wait, hey, what are our requirements for this role, and what are the things that are most important to us? So I would say that for as long as everyone is thinking about how AI can either help them be more productive individually, i.e. spend less time on things that don't matter and more time on things that do, or make higher quality decisions because they have more information at their fingertips that they, in sort of a pre-AI world, would never have had all the resources to gather that information, but now they can. As long as they're sort of still in control of the decision, I think that's like the world that certainly we're building towards. we're building towards. Now, if you want to say, well, will AI ever actually make the decision? Will we expose human beings to literally be responsible for every single decision in all the micro decisions that result in someone getting hired? Probably not, but that's also not the case right now, right? There's lots of ways that we ought, as we mentioned earlier, if you don't have certain requirements, if you don't meet certain requirements, don't apply, or whatever it might be. So we already sort of pull those things away. It's just that those things will get smarter because they will actually be reinforced by what actually ends up being the thing that it turns out mattered for that hire. So for sure, there's going to be bruises along the way, and I think there's a lot of responsibility on behalf of buyers and users of AI to get smart about it. But the end goal we're all sort of aligned on, which is better decisions, less time wasted. And that's really the way we think about it.
Yeah. Just a quick, thank you for that, Sal. Just a quick bit of housekeeping, which I forgot to mention. But folks, if you're using the webinar chat, can you default to everyone when you're doing that? Because I think we should be publicly debating this, and I actually suspect a lot of you actually want the chat to be visible to everyone, but sometimes I think Zoom defaults to panelists only, so like us four see it and no one else sees it. So just make sure you default to everyone and everyone can see what you're saying. By the way, some great comments. I'm going to pick these up in a bit, but I want to introduce this idea, which I can't recall which genius kind of gave it to me. Certainly wasn't from me. But this individual was referring to where it was safest to use AI. So in other words, there was you kind of have some sort of measure of safety as to when it's okay to use and when it's not controversial. And then there's a sliding scale as to when it gets more controversial. And I suppose in the recruitment context, the most controversial part is when you outsource the decision-making entirely to AI. We can understand, hey, that may be unsafe. Let's not do that. But where it is more safe is individual productivity. For instance, it seems like it's pretty uncontroversial that using AI to just speed yourself up is a smart thing to do. If you could, I don't know, interview scheduling, or if you needed AI to sort your inbox out or something like that, it seems to be pretty safe. So one of those areas that we can have a think about, or at least one of those concepts we can have a think about when we're dropping AI into our process is it actually a safe or non-controversial usage of the technology? And then I think you should be good to go, because what we don't want to do is be in a position where we're so frightened to use it that we end up kind of accepting huge inefficiencies, which in the end actually produce the negative experience for candidates. I mean, candidate experience, a huge factor based, I believe, predominantly on human recruiters not having the capacity to deal with everything properly and in a timely way. So there may be some obvious things that we can use there. Okay, let's talk about the sort of information that we expect sort of AI to be able to collect. What do you think is the sort of information that is most valuable, most safe, if you like, at this point, when we're thinking about artificial intelligence? Matthias, you got any thoughts to share on this idea?
Yeah, I mean, what I've been thinking of is this whole storytelling engagement piece, right? So assume you have an ATS function where you say, this is my process, this is my role, this is what is actually happening. And then AI will help you to create a storytelling approach on every email template that you send out, engage with people. If they have questions, literally go in this chatbot direction where candidates are taken care of, response times are taken care of, and you literally have always an interaction and get all the questions answered in a meaningful way. I can see this happening, especially with high volume recruitment, but also in general, because how good are we in copywriting? Yeah, probably not as good as the AI that exists. Another thing is what I think I would see happening is if AI can be an advisor, say, oh, I have this role, these are the criteria that I need to check. What is the best assessment approach here? What would you like me to do, right? Is it just interviews? Is it just like, oh no, do a case study, presentation, or don't do anything at all, right? I think that is something that I think has also some power, right? Because in the end of the day, do we all know what is the right way? What is the best way? And I think maybe also going more evidence driven, so maybe also AI helping us to unbiased, or be aware of biases. Yeah, maybe have a bias detection. Yeah, saying, for example, that's something that I could envision with Metaview, right? You have an interview and suddenly something pops up and says, well, based on the questions or based how this interview went, I would highly challenge that scorecard, right? Because that's maybe something that was not done in a meaningful way. Yeah, and I think also what I like with Metaview is not just note taking, but what I also think is the feedback that you can get from interviewers, right? So you get actually feedback on your questions. How do you ask the questions? How is this working out? And I think this is meaningful insights for people who don't have time creating interview trainings, so that you have training through that tool on the spot, right? That is something that is also then, I would say, to a certain extent, a little unbiased, because it's not just the people or the recruitment team giving you feedback, but it's actually a tool that helps you based on how you performed in those interviews.
A really comprehensive answer there, Matthias, and actually 3 things that I think each worth sitting on. I love, firstly, the idea that we're fearful of AI as being a tool that amplifies bias, but actually it can obviously be used for debiasing. I mean, let's accept that human beings are inherently biased. That's not a bad thing. This is just our evolutionary way. You know, we take cognitive shortcuts. That's how we operate. But sometimes when it comes down to things like recruitment, these evolutionary adaptations become fundamentally unfair to particular candidates, and actually pejorative to our jobs as, you know, hiring the best people for the company. So AI could help you just be that kind of best friend, if you like. You know, it could be the person that tests for things. And in fact, I think one of the first use cases I think I came across with Metaview was exactly this, wasn't it, Siadhal? It was like, you could kind of test whether sort of the human interviewers are changing their interview style based on, let's say, the gender of the person they're interviewing, or whatever sort of demographic identifier it could be. And that is a very good training tool. That interviewer may not be aware of it. And if they were just reminded, hey, listen, do you know that here's a trend that's occurring as you interview in this way? That's maybe something you want to just be aware of. And that awareness itself might help. So AI is not like one of these things that will horrifyingly make things worse. It could, but it could also make things better. So it's almost like it's like fire, you know, it could burn you, but it can cook your food. So we've got to have that kind of attitude for it. There's a commentator on the chat made something very interesting, and I think I forget who it was. It's on the thing, but I believe it was she. But she mentioned it was like, okay, maybe we should be trained in AI and AI ethics. What's your thoughts on this? I mean, do you think it's a good idea? And have you seen any examples of people saying, you know what, before we let recruiters loose on this, we need to go through some sort of training on how it operates and actually the ethical dimension of it? Any examples of this, Annie? What are your thoughts?
No examples, but definitely would be very keen for it. I think before I let loose and had some sort of AI screening people, I would really want to test that against a human first before you let it loose live. Yeah, I think would be curious to hear if anyone else has implemented training or anything similar.
Here is a short opportunity for someone to make a training business on the ethics of AI. I don't think you've got much time. You've probably got a month before you can make some money off it. So if you're a training provider, you're currently selling sourcing skills, how to do recruitment marketing, whatever it is, the hot to trot, guaranteed going to be totally sold out is how do recruiters use AI ethically? If someone could run a course of that type and bring on an ethicist or whatever it is, I guarantee you that will be sold out. Correct if I'm wrong, folks. If you saw a AI ethics course for recruiters, would you sign up for it? Yes, you would. You'd pay $99 a month or whatever it is.
On that hang, I think that makes a ton of sense, using it ethically, of course. I also think, though, there's just a lot of what I've seen makes me think there's also a lot to be said for helping people use it effectively. I see a lot of people in various industries, but let's talk about recruiting specifically, who almost treat something like ChatGPT as when it gives an answer, that's good. So like, hey, write me a job description for this role. And oh my God, it did it. That's amazing. Let's use that. And that is exactly not the way to use this type of technology, because there is no sort of guarantee that just because it's there does not mean it's great. So obviously the way we think about leveraging AI is, well, we use it more to sort of drive productivity around summarizations and sort of maybe helping you see things that you could see yourself if you sat in every single interview, but that's not possible. So it's a productivity driver that way. But I think what people really need to be careful of is things that are generated that are generated by by AI are not necessarily good. You still have to exercise judgment. And a lot of the people who are increasingly sort of mature in how they leverage these tools, they sort of use these as like building blocks, right? It's like it's going to save me writing the JD, first of all, the foundations of the JD, but I'm still the curator and I'm the editor. And frankly, I'm the one responsible for the quality of this thing, even if I didn't like tap every keystroke. So, and the way that's an ethical thing, but it's also an effectiveness thing. Because of course, let's continue with the example of job description, if you put out a poor job description, you're either not going to attract good candidates and you're going to waste time, or you're going to end up believing that the population of candidates that you see are the best that's out there. You're going to hire one of them and they're not going to do a great job and your company's going to lose. So I think there's an effectiveness sort of part to this as well.
Yeah, very interesting point. And by the way, on the job descriptions thing, I don't know whether anybody has seen LinkedIn sort of start to launch this. Vigorous nods from Annie and Matthias. Annie, I wonder whether you could describe what LinkedIn are trying to do with the AI job descriptions thing.
I just saw it today, like just before jumping on the call, but it sounds like they're doing a similar thing to ChatGPT in terms of just building out fully formed JDs for people to save time, I guess, I think is what I've understood, but I'm not sure if anyone has any other insights on that.
Has anybody used this feature? Is it actually live? Is it beta tested or whatever? Let me know what you think. I mean, I can only speculate because I haven't seen it either, Annie, but I suspect it's LinkedIn has got a unique opportunity because it has so much job description data, and it can also track applicant the effectiveness of the ad. So presumably it could put together an advert that is superior to a human written one based on what works. Yeah. So that's a very exciting and interesting activity, even though again it's all like slightly scary because you think, what does that mean exactly? And you know, what happens to job writing? Do candidates, you know, will their effectiveness degrade over time? Because wouldn't all the adverts start looking the same, for instance?
I think it's sort of the fear around this stuff is somewhat in the eye of the beholder. And again, it depends how you use it. Whenever I've in the past been responsible for writing a job description, what have I done? I've spent like a good few hours going through other job descriptions of other companies of similar roles to try and get some inspiration for how they write about it and therefore how I should. And so in that way, AI is providing this sort of, I think Matthias, you mentioned assistant, it's providing that assistant role. It's like, hey, guess what? Suddenly you've got an assistant beside you who you can give like a really clear instruction, and they're going to in a few seconds essentially do all of that research for you and give you a suggestion. It doesn't mean you're going to take that assistant suggestion sight unseen. You might even ask it, give me 4 different suggestions, write me one that's in the style of Meta, one that's in the style of EMnify, one that's in the style of Cleo, who knows? But that's obviously the power that you have as the orchestrator of this AI. But yeah, I think that's a really good example. Like as a human, you do spend a ton of time researching what other people have already done. That's essentially what these models are doing too. They're looking what everyone else has already done and giving you a sort of a custom generated, in this case, JD.
Yeah, I think point,
go ahead.
Earlier as well around recruiters using ChatGPT to come up with questions to use in phone screens, maybe where they don't have the expertise. I think it's always good to kind of check those questions with the hiring manager and make sure they make sense, and to learn from the hiring manager what a good answer looks like to those specific questions. I think when you're working with really time poor execs that don't have time to maybe necessarily write out a list of 10 questions for a recruiter to run through in that first interview, or even in their interview with that candidate, I think it's good to have some prompts for them. But I agree, definitely not necessarily to use all of them as a script, and maybe kind of work with them as a prompt, essentially.
That's a really good observation, Annie. I think what we're getting from a little bit of this is that whatever the output is from these tools, they're not like immediately deployable like straight away, or at least if you do so, that comes with the concurrent risk of whatever might happen. But it is useful as a starter. Like if you're starting with literally a blank sheet, it may well be that it's best to, you know, grab some of that raw material in and then work it yourself once it's there. And as you say, Annie, you know, great to get. I mean, what an awful thing that recruiters have asked hiring managers to do. Hey, can you come up with these 10 killer questions? And it's like hiring manager must roll their eyes to the back of their skull, think, I'm sure what they're thinking is, why don't you do your own job, Mr. Recruiter or Mrs. Recruiter? And we diminish the department as a result of asking the question. Therefore, we don't, and therefore we run the risk of, asking the wrong thing to the candidate, et cetera, et cetera. So I think to be able to provision a list of questions, the hiring manager say, hey, listen, what's missing from this list? I think that totally changes the tenor of the conversation you might be having. Okay, that's a really good theme. By the way, there's lots of interesting comments coming in. Pedro, particularly, I get your ethical concerns. We're going to try and reach those towards the end. If there's any particular questions you want to ask, by the way, we're going to lose this webinar thread. Put them in the Q&A. We'll make sure we'll reach them. Okay, let's have a think about the technical side. I mean, we look at recruiting. Recruiting, obviously, candidates. Every candidate is a candidate, needs to be treated with the same degree of respect. However, we often think technical candidates are special for various reasons, perhaps because we assess them differently, and oftentimes we do because we put them through testing, training, etc., etc. Where do you see AI's role here? Let's say the classic technical test. One of the things we immediately realized, the tech recruiters amongst us, when ChatGPT 3 first came out, was actually the take-home test is probably extinct, because you can't send someone away and say, hey, do this thing, because they could simply pipe it into ChatGPT and instruct it to come up with the code, and it would do so. So how has AI changed technical testing in your companies, and where do you think it's going to go going forward? Matthias, let's go with you to start with. Oh, we've lost your audio, Matthias. Let's give that a fiddle, fella. There you go, folks. No matter how AI you get, it's all based on hardware, copper,
Can you hear me now, Hung?
Yeah, we can hear you fine. Go ahead.
Yeah, so you can see this already with other providers that Codility, I think, is at the moment claiming to have a tech library that is AI protective. And so all of the Codility, HackerRank, and other providers that you might use for technical challenges to actually automate the process already and make it more seamless and drive candidate experience, they probably have a good a chunk to do to actually protect this, detect this, which they already were doing when somebody's cheating the test, etc., etc. So that is one way to cover yourself a little bit. But then on the other hand, I think what does it tell you about your technical challenge, right? If ChatGPT is actually solving it, so maybe we have the wrong technical challenges. Yeah, I'm not saying people don't know what they are doing, but it should actually be, are we asking the right questions, or should we maybe rethink this a little bit in order to say, do we really want them to solve that piece of the puzzle, or is it actually something more complex that there has some limitations? I mean, I don't want to go further. I think there are experts that can discuss this much further, but this is also what I saw based on the reaction of the community to say, hey, if ChatGPT is actually solving your tech challenge, maybe you need to rethink your tech challenge, no?
That's a really fascinating angle, and it goes to the depth of even software engineering job design. Like, what do you want this person to do? Because if in fact AI does solve this problem, then if you hired this developer, the person would be asking the AI to do that. So what do we want this person for? So I think, by the way, I know that sort of recruiters here are also having this existential crisis about, is it going to steal our jobs, etc. Believe you me, this conversation is happening very heavily and very prominently within software engineering circles also, perhaps even more so than us in recruiting, because the truth is a generative AI can produce a flawless code. There's no typing errors in this. One of the ways in which bugs get into systems is simply a slippage on the keyboard. Something goes in that shouldn't have gone in, a little space that wasn't a space, and then suddenly there's a bug there. So ChatGPT doesn't make this error. So, but let's investigate the job design issue a little bit later. I want to talk about how much trust we have on the detection capability of these testing providers. Folks, do you trust any of these providers to say, hey, listen, we have bulletproof tests to say we know this is human typed? It's basically what they're saying. Are they going to actually install keylogging software into developers' sort of computers? How are they going to do that? Any thoughts? Let's go to you, Siadhal. Actually, you're a good person to ask, because you are obviously, aside from producing this software in a very meta way, you're also a manager of a team of software engineers, potentially hiring software engineers, right? So how has this sort of technology transformed your thinking about how to assess for technical competence?
Yeah, I think in many ways people will sort of maybe look back on this, and this is like a needed conversation, but I think maybe in future years people might look back on it and laugh a little bit. Like, I think when if you go back a couple of decades, people would have thought it was questionable to Google things during let's say a technical interview to see how to do something. Whereas now internally at sort of modern companies, that's almost expected. Like, if you're not using your resources to create sort of effectively get to the goal, then there's actually maybe something wrong in your makeup as an operator, as a builder. So I think the way things will go is there will this sort of proctoring of, hey, are they using some sort of like code generator here, will completely go away, just as the idea that you don't Google something, like nowadays you don't Google something to find it out, is seen as like, why would you bother? So that's my sort of, I guess, philosophy on it. Practically speaking, we do our technical interviews are live interviews, so you get to see the tools that people use when they're solving these challenges, and it also means that actually you're bringing much of what we care more about, frankly, and which is the human aspect of how do they collaborate, what questions do they ask the interviewer during, how do they explain what they're doing, because even if they don't get to the right final result, if that can often be explained away in a sort of like a sort of semi-artificial 1 hour setting, because you understand how they got there. So there's a very practical short-term thing. Obviously start to do them live, but longer term, I just wouldn't concern yourself with it. You should just be, the nature of how software engineers operate is going to change because they have better tools at their disposal, and your take homes or your technical challenges should start to reflect that.
Yeah, very interesting. Annie, have you gone back to real-time technical testing at Cleo?
Yeah, we turned our back on tech tests a long time ago, I think, just because it really killed conversion rate generally. But I think for us, I think that the pairing's a really interesting exercise. It is quite time consuming though. It's 2 hours of 2 engineers' time. That's very expensive for a business to go through that. So I wonder if there's a way of ChatGPT kind of taking away some of that heavy lifting from a technical perspective. But I think to the previous point, I think that human interaction when you're working through technical problems live is really key to see for most technical roles. We did put most of our SQL tests for our data roles through ChatGPT, and it passed all of them. So we were a bit worried, but I think they do those questions live, so you can kind of see and interact with a person and see how they think through the problems as well, thankfully.
Yeah, and by the way, I'm not hammering any of the tech platforms either, because I think the other solution they have is also a side-by-side pair programming style. So I think what's going to happen is that those platforms will actually really hoover up the market, because what's being damaged here is the DIY technical test. The one where you like send it off, trust the person to go and do what they're going to do, send it back. Probably not going to get much valuable information from that, unless, of course, the real test is the interview afterwards. As you mentioned, Siadhal and Annie, the dialogue, can this person then explain how they come to the answer? So I noticed someone mentioned the calculator. It's exactly that. Banning a calculator makes no sense, but you can explain the working out. It's like you ask the person, does the individual explain the working out of this? And to finally address your point at the very beginning, Matthias, like your skill in using the AI is actually going to be a big component of whether you're going to be a good engineer of today and the future. In the same way that Googling, your skills to do information retrieval were in yesteryear sort of a similarly good measure. There's a professor that I follow on Twitter called Ethan Mollick. I don't know whether anybody follows this guy. Really, really smart fellow. He's been great on Twitter because he does this summarization of long papers, sort of in tweets, so everyone understands it. I think he recognizes his tweeting career is over because ChatGPT is going to replace him. But he's embraced it completely, and he actually instructs his students to use generative AI on papers. Like, he expects them to use it. So rather him trying to impossibly police it, he's saying, you know what, I want you to use it. We're just going to change how we assess people. We're gonna get you to talk through it. We're gonna probably more Viva style. So I wonder whether the assessment piece, and this is the topic of today's conversation, of course, shifts away from this asynchronous documentation heavy, more towards like almost like a Viva. You know, someone's gonna have to come in and justify the thing, and then you're gonna have to interview back and stuff like this. So actually, the human aspect of the job is gonna still be there, and that's an interesting thing for us in recruiting to have a think about.
Can I just add something to that on that, Hung? You mentioned about essentially one of the things, I think the tangible things that maybe was already starting to happen anyway, is I think generally the best companies are broadening their understanding of what their software engineers bring to the table, even to the point where you see more and more job titles changing, right? Product engineer was not something that people used to talk about a bunch a few years ago. Now you'll see a bunch of companies who, when they're hiring engineers, they're hiring product engineers. And that comes with it certain expectations around the fact that they think about customers and they think about business needs and they think about it's not about the code that they output. So again, I think that's the thing that's going to change. What you don't want to do is create an assessment flow whereby you're identifying the people who are best at tapping out code with their own hands, you know, when that's not actually the thing that they're going to be doing in the job, because you're just going to end up hiring way more engineers than everyone else has to, burning all your cash on that, and you're not going to end up winning as a business. So I don't want to act like there is a revolution at play here, but the answer isn't what weapons do we have to fight against it and see if we can beat this revolution. It's to think, what do we change about, how do we sort of ride this wave as opposed to fight against it? And I think that's like a key way. You hire fewer people, they can be higher leverage people. What's not to like as a business?
Yeah, I mean, there's business logic to that. I mean, if you kind of zoom out a bit and take a look at the world sort of over the last 3-4 years or so, we've had a couple of big concussive blows against the concept of mega scale businesses. You know, you remember COVID, when the first wave of COVID came through, mass redundancies everywhere. Of course, the companies that had the most employees were the ones that had to make most layoffs and had a huge nightmare with it. So coming back from COVID, it was like, okay, maybe we don't need to be this kind of scale again. Now ChatGPT rolls in. I think it's going to have a similar effect. So the overall size of organizations will definitely crunch. Like, for instance, I don't expect Meta to ever be the same. They've hit peak employee in terms of numbers, right? And you could say that true for almost any of the big tech companies out there. They're never going to be the same size. And if you're going to set up a new company again, you're going to have a completely rescaled sort of vision as to how big an organization it is. Now, I hope what that means is you're going to get a lot more labor that's loose in the market that will end up setting up more businesses. So potentially the barriers to create a new business will simultaneously be unlocked using technology of this type. And we could probably expect a lot of that happening. So it's going to be less mega, much more distributed, independent organizations out there. So I think still tons of stuff for recruiters to get their teeth around. Folks, we're coming up to the last 10 minutes mark. So now is the time to put your questions in Q&A. If you have any, we're going to go to them in about 5 minutes. Okay. So have a think about what you want to talk about. If you put something in the chat, we haven't addressed it, copy and paste what you said and put it into the Q&A and we'll get to it. Same for you folks on LinkedIn. If you've got any questions, we've got people monitoring what those questions are. So just ask them in the comments and we'll get to them in about 5 minutes. Okay, let's do some future prognosis, folks. Candidate, AI and assessment. Where do you think, we've talked about where we're at now. We've talked about, yes, AI is going to help empower the human decision maker. It's going to change a few things in terms of technical assessments. It's hopefully going to always keep the human being in charge of those critical decisions. Do you see it staying that way? Where do you see it going 12 months and then 5 years down the line? Being fully aware, by the way, it's impossible to make these assessments because we know we're in a chaos timeline. We've got no clue, but let's have a bit of fun with a bit of projection where we're going to be in 12 months time with AI. Annie, I want to go to you first. Any particular thoughts on this 12-month timeline and then 5-year timeline?
12 months, I think hiring managers and talent teams alike will be used to working with AI tools and very confident and comfortable using it. I think I wouldn't even want to guess 5 years down the line because who knows, but definitely see recruiters spending less time on the boring stuff, the scheduling, the heavy lifting admin, and more time one-on-one, having really interesting conversations and building those relationships and building their networks as well. So kind of things that the AI can't really replicate, essentially.
No, very, very interesting. And by the way, you mentioned a few things that are going to go away. Do we agree, folks, that interview scheduling is more or less out? You know, the idea of trying to find, I mean, I do it for fun now. I mean, when someone sends me a request and say, hey, have you got time? I'm prepared to do that dialogue because I know it's going to be historical, right? So I'm kind of tasting the end of history, so to speak. So I still do this manually. But that's going to go away. Your interview notes, I think, is gone, right? That's if people are going to use Metaview or a competitor product or whatever it's going to be, that we've proven that this is better. That's going to go. What else do you think is going to go from the recruiter job, Annie? Any more apart from those two? Yeah, you reckon?
A lot of the writing job, maybe not writing all the job specs like we've kind of mentioned already, but kind of writing job specs, summarizing interview notes, building out offer packets for I don't know, home panels as well, things like that. Those, when you have the heavy admin when it comes to writing up notes and things like that, I think will go. Yeah,
so copy generation, let's say that's going to go down 90%, would you say? I don't know whether anybody's measured this, but you know, just in terms of keystrokes, like keystrokes per word output, it would be an interesting exercise to measure. I'm still writing everything by hand, so I should actually measure this, because inevitably I'm going to have to get to that place where, yes, you can ask the AI to push it back, and what is the efficiency that you're going to produce from this? I think it's pretty similar to, in terms of output, it would be similar to learning how to type properly compared to someone who literally is still finger jabbing the keyboard. You're going to be the person that can type faster or produce output faster is going to kind of have that advantage. So yes, that's going to go. Okay, thank you very much, Annie. Let's go to you, Matthias. Give us the 12-month and 5-year. Have you got any views on this? What's going to look like in those timeframes?
Yeah, I'm going to be really boring. Annie nailed it on the 12 months. I think how do we comfortably use AI in our current practices? That's definitely something that's going to happen and appear more and more often. I think on the 5 years, I have something maybe too crazy, but talent acquisition leaders will be hired how they use AI probably in their recruitment process to increase the productivity to a certain percentage. And that is part of the interview approach and how you nail it, right? Maybe it's then something like, hey, how do I train my AI in order to coach and enable hiring managers? Or how do I use AI to, increase my sourcing numbers or sourcing KPIs? Yeah. How do you use this? How do you set it up, and which tools do you use? Or how do you even do it with the help of engineers, right? So that's probably something I would love to see in 5 years.
Yeah, very, very good. And by the way, Gabor, really good comment on the thread there. Absolutely, candidates will be using AI. There's no question. In some respects, they're ahead of us in doing so. I don't know whether anybody saw the TikTok, I think it was, with this dude saying, yeah, hey, use AI and like automate your job applications. We've just cranked this out. But this is where we need AI countermeasures. This is why I think AI does have a place in front of the recruiters. We're talking about improving recruiters' kind of capabilities. Of course, I think that's the safest place to put it. But at some point, we're also going to have to deploy it against the candidate AI, because we should expect an exponential increase of what looks like relevant applications from candidates. How are we going to deal with that? A human being can't. And in fact, if a human being attempted it, would actually be doing it a disservice, because our brains will simply be fried. We're not able to look at the same type of data over and over and have the same degree of emotional steadiness through it. In fact, it's be considered a kind of a manifestation of neurodiversity if you're able to do this. Human beings get bored very, very easily. And I think if you see the same bit or style of information, I think it's 7 or 8 times, really, really short iteration, you end up just like pressing like randomly to get through the experience. So imagine if you had like constantly flood of CVs coming through. That has to be intercepted by something, doesn't it, folks? It's got to be AI. How do we think about that? That's another thing we're going to talk about, hopefully, throughout the rest of this series. Okay, let's go to you, Sal. You actually have to answer this question more seriously than Annie or Matthias, because you have a responsibility for mapping out the product roadmap and thinking, okay, where the heck are we going to be? 12 months down the line, where are we? 5 years down the line, where do you think we're going to be?
Yeah, so I actually think the panel nailed it in terms of year down the line, which is truly moving to that point where we are orchestrating AI for it to benefit us and make us more productive, and just learning, probably like with a few false starts where we try certain things that doesn't work out, and then you try the things and it does. Like that sort of like experimentation phase, I think, is now. When you think about sort of 5 years down the line, I think, again, really hard to do a true prediction, but so again, big picture, how close are we as a recruitment industry? How close are we to our goal, which is this like highly efficient, perfect matching of candidates to jobs? We are very, 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 very far away. There's a lot of people sitting in jobs that they're terrible at. There's a lot of people interviewing for jobs that they're great at and they don't get the jobs. There's a lot of people whose CVs get thrown out before they even get the chance. So we are just like a million miles away from what we're trying to do. Not through anyone's fault. It's just impossible up to now. And so I think what you're going to see is a sort of a one-by-one removal of all of the things that we spend tons of time on, things like Annie mentioned, like writing up job specs, writing up interview scripts, writing up our interview notes, and slowly moving towards the higher leverage things, like how many people would love to be running a better structure of their intake meeting with the hiring manager? How many people would be love to be running better debriefs? You know, these soft but vital moments in the recruiting phase are what recruiters are increasingly going to own, leverage still by AI, but they won't be doing all of the sort of the rote work around that. And I think over time, what you'll see is as you sort of like pluck these rote tasks off your sort of to-do list one by one, suddenly your job has fundamentally changed. And I think potentially you have like a bigger seat at the table as well of like, you know, organizational strategy, because actually you have time all of a sudden to be involved in those things. So yeah, that's the way, that's what I see happening. But again, a million different ways, different sort of directions that could take. At the moment, we're thinking about it every single day, talking with customers about it every single day, and reacting to it as quickly as we can without being, while keeping that mission in mind, right? Perfect matching of talent to jobs is what this is for. And anything we can do to sort of create anything that doesn't help us, to remove anything that doesn't help us with that, we try and get it out of the way.
Yep, fantastic stuff. Okay, cool. Folks, we're going to go to the Q&A. So if you've got any questions, keep asking them in there. We're going to go through them one by one, so long as they are safe for work. Let's have a look. Okay, so is there a voting thing here? No, we're going to have to just do it chronologically, I guess. So let's just do it. Okay, I'm going to read it live. This is from Sean. What is being done to assure AI does not factor out candidates with more ethnic sounding names? So I guess this is the classic this is what human beings actually are really bad at. This is part of the reason why I'm very sympathetic to the use of AI when it comes to the top of funnel screening, because human beings actually are guilty of screening out people with ethnic sounding names. So what is being done to assure AI does not factor in? I guess you could just anonymize it or something. I mean, isn't that the most obvious thing we should do? What are your thoughts on this? Annie, do you want to give this an answer?
Yeah, I think hopefully when you're testing the AI against a human, you can look at the results versus the demographic data that's coming in and make sure that it's not skewing in a really bad way. But yeah, I think removing names from CVs is a really good fix there. But yeah, I'd hope maybe the AI could be even more objective than the human in that kind of decision making, for sure.
Yep, I think so. I'd love to put it to panel, folks, but we're running out of time, so we won't be able to do it. So I'll nominate the answer, okay? Let's go for Melissa. I like this question. Is it considered a good thing in the world of TA to say that you use AI to help assess candidates? So I think this is a little bit of PR. So do you remember there was a very interesting news story where I think it was a university campus or something where it was a layoff thing. So a layoff announcement was sent out, and there was a default thing in the signature to say this was this layoff announcement was supported by the generation of AI, and that obviously got a massive PR disaster because why is a human being not typing this out? Now, what is the policy when it comes to our position as recruiters and we're communicating with candidates? Do we declare we're using AI? Do we not declare that and make candidate have to assume it? Or are there particular moments where we should and shouldn't? Matthias, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, let's assume I would do it like in candidate assessment. Then I think yes, you need to be upfront about it. I think even with a tool like Metaview for the Germans with GDPR, they are very, very data concerned. So most of the time we need to also explain people what it is for and what it does and what the benefits are. So I think you need to be transparent in the communication, but also address the concerns, right? And address the concerns in a way to say, you know what, in the end of the day, this is an enhancement, but this is not the decision maker, right? So that's the angle I would take in order to also say, hey, you know what, all human beings are biased. We cannot unbiased human beings, not happening, but we have technology that actually helps us to be more objective. Yeah, something around that.
Yeah, excellent stuff. Okay, Gus, I believe that we've already answered this, but perhaps actually, Sai, you want to give this a shot? What's the difference between Metaview and Otter.ai, for instance?
Yeah, sure. So Otter, for folks that don't know, is like a generalist transcription tool. There's many of these sort of types of tools on the market. The difference between Metaview and something like that is just the use case specificity, right? We are designed to make your interviews really easy to navigate. So essentially, after you've recorded, transcribed, summarize them. The summary is actually custom made to fit into your existing workflows. We know one of the people in the conversation was a candidate. We know you're mainly interested in what the candidate said in answer to the question, not necessarily in parts of the interview where the interviewer was speaking. We know there's certain metrics off the back of that conversation, like candidate talk time and how many questions they asked that you're interested in, where a generalist tool like Otter and others will never do that stuff because they're more for just recording every other meeting. So what we think and know, frankly, is that there's a lot of people out there who spend a ton of time with a very particular type of conversation. And that type of conversation is interviewing. And it makes a lot of sense in that world to have a dedicated tool for that type of conversation.
Yeah, I think that's a really good example. It's probably the identification as to who's speaking. I think some of the general and also the context of the conversation. An interview is a very particular type of conversation, and there's behaviors in there that are very different than what you would normally get in a normal chat in your personal life, let's say, unless you have a very particular personal sort of way of behaving. I don't know. Has anyone tried to use interview techniques in their personal relationships? Let me know in the comments. Might give it a shot, you know. Does it improve your relationships? Go and interview your partner. Who knows? No. Let's go on. This one from Sharia. Sharia, you've asked, how do you stay up to date with the latest advances of AI and recruiting? I want to answer this question because you cannot, folks. It's going too fast. I don't know whether you feel the same. Panelists, do you feel the same? I'm like overwhelmed. I was overwhelmed like 2 months ago in terms of what's happening. It was like, okay, it's just going to flow over. There's no way I can taxonomize any of this. No way I can capture any of it. It's just a complete Cambrian explosion. So there's no way you can do it. You can obviously subscribe to recruitingbrainfood.com. I'm doing my best to stay on top of it. But you know what? Even that is not going to be sufficient. You just got to dive in and experiment as best you can. This is the world we have. Okay, Melissa, again, prolific asker of questions. I do like that. Melissa is saying, okay, would you consider a recruiter who uses AI more skilled than someone who decides against it? I'm talking specifically about candidate assessment and not productivity. So in other words, how would you, like, let's say there's a recruiter that ethically decided not to use AI. I mean, they can potentially say, I do not want to use this. It's contributing to the end of humanity. I'm going to, you know, on team human, whatever it is. Would you consider that? How would you consider a person in terms of skill and competence? Is it legitimate to say, look, this person is therefore less skilled because they're not using this technology? We have time to have an open answer for this. So any quick answers to this open session, folks?
Any?
I wouldn't say I would rate them more highly than someone that was an expert in AI, but I do think I would push them to try it, and for those tasks that maybe can save them time, I think, more than anything. If someone's incredible at doing their job without AI, I'm not going to say that they're going to be better than someone that's amazing at AI. So I think the results typically speak for themselves, to be honest. So yeah, to answer the question, I probably wouldn't rate someone more highly if they're better at AI than someone else.
Okay, quickly, Matthias.
Yeah, same here. It's not about using or not using, it's how you use it, right? And how you make sense of it. So if somebody is using AI in a really bad way, that doesn't make him superior, that makes him actually worse. No. So I would really look at how and why the reason is for not using it or using it.
Yeah, very, very good. Sar, do you want to give a quick observation on this?
Yeah, I mean, if we were hiring a recruiter who had a sort of objection to using AI as part of their tool set, then I'd probably roll my eyes and think you're going to be left behind.
Yep. That's fair enough. I would agree the same. And Pedro, you've made some really amazing comments there. We'd love to get you on screen next time. But I think he's right. So Pedro's also making this statement to say, you know what, the using of the more basic tools will actually improve the intrinsic skill, if you like, of the person doing it. I agree with that. But at the same time, if you have the new technology and it's available and you decide not to use it, you will not get skilled at that new technology. So it's almost like, look, would you prefer to hunt an elephant with your bare hands, or would you want to hunt an elephant with a machine gun? You know what? You could be a very skilled elephant hunter if you manage to successfully survive hunting an elephant with your bare hands. Great. Evolutionary selecting for your skills in doing that. But you know what? You're more likely to survive if you had a machine gun. So I think this is about where we're at with technology.
I guess Pedro just has to hope his pilot's map never gets out of date, basically.
Yeah, by the way, I love elephants. I don't know why I used that example. Okay, Stephanie, quick question for you. Have we got any questions from LinkedIn that we want to handle real quick? I don't know how we're going to deal with that, whether you want to come on screen and let us know, or whether there's a way we can copy and paste it into the Q&A. Let us know.
Yeah, there's actually none right now. I think we've covered everything from LinkedIn.
We've silenced LinkedIn, folks. That's a result. Hey, that's it is. I consider that an achievement. So anyway, we're out of time, everybody. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I hope you've enjoyed the conversation. Let us quick reminder for everybody. This is a 4-part series. We're going to keep talking about this. The next episode is going to be on the 30th of March. We're going to be talking about AI and interviewer training. So in other words, how do we use AI to up-level the human interviewer? And I'm not only talking about recruiters, also talking about hiring managers and indeed anybody that might get involved in an interview context. Have a think about this. If you think about the numbers of people in your current company that you are comfortable to interview candidates, how big a percentage is that? 5%, 10%, no more than that perhaps? Can AI help elevate the numbers of people that can actually be gone and doing this activity of recruiting? Wouldn't it be great if 100% of your organization could be trusted to interview with the support of AI? Would that not make you a much faster recruitment organization? Anyway, make sure you can actually register sort of already on this show. So I think Stephanie will send an email to everyone on this. Make sure you register on that. You can also follow the company page on Metaview because we're going to host it live stream there also. So if you follow that page, you'll be notified. Let's finish it off here over time. So thank you, everyone, for joining. Thanks, Siadhal, Matthias, and Annie for a wonderful panel. And also Stephanie in the background for making sure everything is working. Folks, that's it. Join us next time. We're on the 30th of March.